So what Ingrid and I wanted to do now was to close out the day with a conversation about some big questions. And the way we thought to do that is to ask some of the people here today, some of the speakers, to agree to participate on a panel, sharing their experience, their knowledge, their practice. So we have the keynote speakers and some of the students from the projects. Cornelia Auer, Elias Elmquist, Hana Pokojna, Robin Skånberg, Jörgen Stenlund, Signe Sidwall Thygesen, and finally Martin Krzywinski, who you just saw. And then I sent them a couple of themes that we wanted to talk about. And the first theme is visualization in science communication. It's a pretty big theme, obviously. I also sent them a couple of questions that they could think about. So here are things like, what are the opportunities of visualization in science? What kinds of science are suitable to visualize? And are there areas of science that do not visualize well? And finally, the question of visualization, is it a part of science or is it something you do after the science is done? So just questions to try and get their minds going. And what I wanted to do now was simply to ask these good people to give a short comment on visualization in science communication, something like a minute apiece, just to set the scene. So I'd like to ask Cornelia to go first, if possible.
Quite a challenge. So you would like to hear what, like, my vision or what comes to my mind when I think of visualization in science, or should I directly address your questions?
Well, you have a minute. You can use it the way you think is
okay,
suitable.
Good. Then I try to be spontaneous. Well, visualization in science, I think, is just like an extremely great opportunity, because I once read a book that just depicted how the brain works with images, and that it's like there's no larger channel to the brain than the eye. So I think this is a huge opportunity. And well, what I perceive at the moment, or what is mostly working in my head, is really like, how can we provide trustworthy visualizations, and how can we really live up to the responsibility that we have as science communicators. And this is a very rewarding task, but also a great challenge. So that would be my essence at the moment about the topic.
It's a wonderful start. You are placing us in a position of great power and great responsibility, which is, of course, very attractive. Elias is next on my list. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, when it comes to opportunities in visualization, I see it as a way to kind of establish a universal language that everyone, I guess in the best case, can just understand immediately. You wouldn't need much training or look into tables like that to understand it, that it's something that really decreases the amount of time and effort you need to get into a subject or something like that. So kind of a bridge between the science and the general public, kind of, I see it mostly as that.
So a translation act of sorts into a language that's more accessible.
Yeah, and just that it is universal if it can be done without the speaking languages and like that, that it's universal like that.
Nice. That's a nice image, even though I'm not sure visual is necessarily universal. There's no cultural convention there as well, but still I get your point.
Yeah, and also I guess using natural perception for us, because that's how we see the world, I guess, and that's how we should see information as well.
That's a very attractive proposition. Thank you. Hana, your thoughts?
Hello. So I'll be answering the question from the point of a medical artist or illustrator, which kind of just answering the last part of your question, whether the science come first or the visualization. The whole point of being a medical artist is to take what is already there and kind of translate it visually into something that's more understandable. And this can then later be established more in, for example, communication between patients, surgery planning, training medical staff, or even creating something that's based in science and created into art so people get interested in science. So in that sense, I would say that medical communication and visualization is both quite important and useful. You just have to keep the audience in mind to make it effective.
Can I ask a follow-up on that, Hana? Have you seen examples in your practice or your studies of medical visualization feeding back into science and actually influencing what scientists think about or what they do or what they talk about?
I was thinking about this just before, and I thought, and I don't know, in medical illustration, you already have something, and then you kind of replicate it into a more understandable way. But then when you think about it, you also have things like MRI, CT scans, which are also examples of medical visualization, which then help diagnose and lead to more science or scientific processes. So in that sense, yes.
Yeah, maybe. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Hana. We move on. And the next name on my list is Robin.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on visualization and science communication?
Yes. Well, I kind of got stuck on the part, or I thought more about the part, whether or not visualization is an integral part of science itself, or rather to communicate once it's actually done, or the science is done with it. But from a personal perspective, I use visualization all the time to kind of help me assert the data through some stage of the research, right? In order for me to understand it myself. And sometimes even these small visualizations which I make for myself can be helpful for others, right? Because if I can understand the data to see that it's correct, it will probably also be of value to others later on, even if the outcome is the article at the end, or if it's for public communication, so to say, at the end.
Right.
So I'd rather see it as a very important tool.
So it's a working tool for you also as a science person, and provides you with directions, perhaps, ways to decide how to approach a data set, something like that?
to validate and assert mostly, right? If I can, because I have a mental model or mental image of what I expect to see from the visualization when I apply it to a certain set of data, because I understand the data, I know it roughly, right? So if I don't see what I expect there, right, I might need to go back and rework something, right? Because it was probably an error, maybe.
Wonderful.
Or something interesting.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer. Thank you, Robin. I'm going to have to move on though. And my next name will be Jörgen.
Thank you very much, Jonas. Well, I would like to tweak the first question. What are the opportunities of visualization in science? Since I'm in science education research, I would like to frame it slightly from that perspective.
That's
and I thought great, thank you. And I thought about I tried to find a suitable corner in this enormous space, which the question actually covers. So, well, first I would say, maybe contrary to some of the other ones, that I think that visualizations can aid or support in understanding things that are hard to perceive or understand. By that I mean abstract concepts, for example. It could also be more too small things to big things, stuff like that. I believe that visualization can work well as a supporting building knowledge and understanding in these parts if it's well performed. And the second aspect I would bring up, and that really closely, adheres to Martin's talk also, and that would be it sounds like I've listened first to him and then came up with this, but I actually did it before. It's the affective aspect, which I think is very important also in teaching and learning about science, and that is also actually well supported by research. So these are two opportunities, I would say.
And just for the record, I can certify that Jörgen has been talking about affective aspects of visualizations even before hearing Martin's talk. just to be very clear on that.
Thank you, Jonas.
Thank you, Jörgen. Signe, how about you?
Thank you. A lot of good comments here. I can just add to what has been said already, or try to say what I think about when it comes to scientific visualization. For me, I mean, the world around us, we grasp it with our eyes and our hands and our perception, and to be able to take that a step longer, to take it to the stuff that we cannot on the micro and macro level. We need to use some kind of visualization. So for me, I think about it partly as a tool for our understanding and for the way we want to grasp the world, basically. And we can use that in several ways. And this is also related to doing simplifications, because in a way, we need to do simplifications about that data, about the world, or about the scientific information that we gather. So yeah, I'm thinking a bit about the making models and how accurate should a model be. Is it better if it's more understandable, or should it be more accurate? And of course, that depends on who you are communicating to.
Thank you. Okay, Martin, you are in a privileged position now, because you can actually pick up on everything you heard so far and then add it to your own perspective. So what are your 1 minute thoughts on
Wonderful. It reminds me of a quote, everything has been said, but not everybody has said it yet.
Good.
You know, the same way that we make maps of places and we say, do we need maps? Do maps help? I think, of course they do. And I don't think we need reasons why maps help. They are a shortcut to the terrain. Visualizations allow us to quickly show what would otherwise be too laborious to say in words. And a long time ago, you know, you could look up Darwin's Origin of the Species, and there's one figure in the book, which is the first phylogenetic tree that has ever been drawn by anyone, and say, but of course we always think about things in terms of trees. Why would we say this in a sentence? It's just too long. We don't have that time. It's a shortcut. And I think visualization isn't just plots. There are more things that are visualizations than we imagine. A mathematical formula, A over B, a fraction, that is a kind of visualization. It is a spatial encoding of things positioned relative to one another. The integral with the infinities, top and bottom, two limits, that's a kind of visualization. As soon as you have a spatial or a color component to encoding, it is a kind of visualization. You could argue that letters are visualizations of sounds. So without it kind of devolving into everything is a visualization, we have been doing this forever. We look at the world, we see relationships to things, we see things on top of things, we see things beside things, we see things under things, and we infer relationships that we hope we can correctly display on paper. And that's one of the things that visualizations allow you to do. It's very quickly demonstrate complex relationships between things that you just wouldn't say in words. First, nobody would follow you, and you'd probably make a mistake in speaking.
Right. Thank you very much. We do have an audience member who raised his hand here. Mario, would you like to follow up on this?
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to add what Martin said. He quoted Feynman. And in fact, Feynman diagrams are a perfect example of coming up with a visualization that without it, you couldn't have made the science, or it would have been more complex than needed. So Feynman diagrams came to be as a simplification of mathematics, which according to Feynman's quote that Martin had, was already a simplification of harder ways of doing things.
No, I love it. That's an amazing point. And thank you so much for bringing up with it. You can actually compute with Feynman diagrams.
Yes, exactly.
So they're spectacular, and they're just next level stuff. And if people are not familiar with them, you should Google them, and you will immediately see them as both art and have this feeling that there's something going on in these diagrams. They're fantastic.
Wonderful. So lots of plugs for Feynman then.
I know.
No, that's great. I mean, he deserves it. So let me challenge the panelists here for just 1 second, staying on this topic. Has any one of you come across science, whatever that means, that were not amenable to visualization, that just didn't work or couldn't work in a visual representation for a, shall we say, general audience communication purpose? Has any one of you seen those examples? And what would they be? Cornelia, go ahead.
Well, if anybody has seen science that doesn't work, then maybe he or she should go first, because I have seen data that shouldn't work, that wouldn't work. And
that's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, because that was really occupying me a lot when you sent out the questions before, and that was also a big learning that I had lately, that especially if you have data that could induce by being communicated a lot of consequences, and you see that the data is just not sufficiently correct or something, then the question is really if you should visualize it. There is this famous case of Italian scientists that miscommunicated the risk of avalanche. And in the end, they got sued in front of court because not they had done a mistake in their science, but because they had miscommunicated it. And so I think this is a very impressive example. And I really think now that it is important that in such a case, if you get data that you don't trust, like recently I got data which is about impact scenarios. And they show impacts that it looks like our agricultural yields would increase through climate change because we have the effect of CO2 fertilization. So CO2 is good for plants as such, and we have longer growing seasons, etc. But they cannot cover extreme events, or they cannot cover the effect that plants can die once they don't have water for over a month. And this is not just like outlier data, this is very common data. And I think then here you really have to find a solution to whether really hand back the responsibility that you have as a communicator to the scientists and say, okay, I'm not going to visualize this. And also to take care of yourself that you don't try to visualize it in any case, because this is something I experienced a while ago, that I kind of went back and forth with the scientists in order to make the data better and better, but it costs you a lot of time, and you should just really be aware what is your responsibility and what is their responsibility, and just in case pass it back. So it's not a technical way of not being able to be visualized, but more what should I say, a soundness or a consistency.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's actually what most people can relate to, in the sense that when you are supposed to visualize something, you're also supposed to kind of vouch for its integrity and its meaning, and there is no way around being straight, so to speak. And in a paper, you can get away with lots of hedges and lots of reservations and lots of uncertainty in things, because language and mathematics allow us to do that. But once you go into the visual realm and address a different audience, there has to be more clarity. And then that's when these kind of gaps present themselves. I think this is very relatable. Anyone else who had a thought on that?
I have a couple examples.
Sure.
What comes to mind is things like general relativity, very difficult to show, and any visualizations of that imply that time is like a space, like a spatial dimension, which it isn't. Other high dimensional theories in physics like Kaluza-Klein that tries to unify gravity with other forces, 5 dimensions, very hard. But more practically in biology, where I am currently in, the demonstration of uncertainty around data is nearly impossible. And the reason is that we have technical error due to equipment. We have biological variation. In physics, you have no physical variation. Every electron is the same. But in biology, no 2 cells are the same. And this has nothing to do with uncertainty. This has to do with natural variation. But then we have uncertainty due to poor laboratory practices, variability that between laboratories that are due not to the biology but to other things. Overlaying uncertainty on top of high dimensional data is super hard. And then trying to communicate uncertainty to people is even more difficult. I mean, most scientists don't know the difference between confidence and prediction intervals. So why would we expect that when we show a band around some fit, I mean, already there, that's a lot to ask for in the public, when we show a band of uncertainty, that they can interpret that? Does that mean that everything always falls in the band? Does that mean that most of the time? What does most of the time mean? So uncertainty is very difficult, and we need to try harder. And I think at some point, the bandwidth of the page and the bandwidth of the eye is saturated, and we have to break it down into digestible chunks. This idea that we can come up with the mother of all visualizations and explain everything in one figure, I don't think that that's possible any more than I can pick one word that describes completely how I'm feeling right now. Right? It's going to be a bunch of words, which I've said a bunch of words already. And so we're going to, and nobody's saying, well, we need a language where there's only one word and that word says everything. Obviously, the more words a language has, the more expressive it becomes, the more nuance there is, even if there's hopelessly many synonyms. And I think with visualizations the same. We need to figure out how to draw simple visualizations well and connect them through a theme. I don't think we need to start going at the other end and going, let's just make something incredibly complicated that captures everything. So little tools that solve little problems, little solutions joined together to create big solutions.
Yeah, I mean, the metaphor of visual language is quite common. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I was actually waiting for people to bring up uncertainty, specifically when you ask the question of what's difficult to visualize. And I suppose for people on the North American continent, for example, hurricane path prediction would be a good example of how difficult it is to.
Oh, you just get a Sharpie and then you continue the line.
Yeah, I heard. I didn't see it myself because I'm not located there, but I heard about it, of course. Apparently, it's a very, very hard problem. So anyway, yes. It's almost 3:30 and we should respect people's time and commitments. So I'm actually going to say thank you so much to the panelists. This is all we have time for.